Hello friends, I'm reading comments here. Greg, Vincent, Mibu, welcome back. Greg says, finally it's back. Seems like a long time since the last one. Isn't that right? Man, I've been nervous. I've been really nervous about doing this again. It's kind of weird. Having really like stage fright of going back to it, but here we are. A long time overdue to get back on track with the weekly Wednesday live broadcast, isn't it? Oh my God, are you receiving my newsletter? Well, if you are, you already know that I sent a wrong link for everybody earlier today via mail. So, oh man, sorry about that. The first one, it was, the video link was wrong. So it was a video that was not published yet, a little story of a special custom guitar called The Riddler. Now, some of you maybe saw the video before. I made it private. You can't open the link anymore. Sorry. But if you did, remember, guys, it's highly classified. It's top secret material. It's not public yet. So don't tell others. But it's coming out soon anyway. As part of a article to our website, to the spotlight section of our website, we will add this guitar called The Riddler in there. And I'm excited about that. It's a pretty cool little video. Those of you who have forgotten me in the meanwhile, my name is Juha Ruokangas, your humble servant on a mission from the gods, from the goddesses of fretted instruments. And I'm happy to be back. And I'm even happier that you're here. Or well, there, wherever you are, watching, listening, my fellow time travelers. I'm reading here from my settings, from my control layout, that everything should be working fine. In the meanwhile, the software has updated itself and so on. So whenever you notice from the chat, or you could write to the chat if you can hear me fine and everything seems to be fine. So I also know. I mean, from my end, everything looks to be fine, and I checked the internet speed. We should be all okay, and like really an adrenaline rush to get back to this. But now the threshold is getting down again. I'm hoping I'm starting to feel a bit more relaxed now. I did forget to bring myself a glass of water, so whenever if Emma is watching this, I'm not sure if she is there today, but if Emma is watching this, darling, could you please bring me a glass of water? In the meanwhile, let me tell you a little story. Have you ever heard about the problem of longitude? The problem of longitude. Well, we have to wind back a few hundred years. Okay? As crazy as it sounds in the modern time we live now, navigation on open sea, it was very much guesswork until late 18th century. Latitude was relatively easy to determine with the help of sun, at noon, and then these charts, these tables telling you the sun's declination for the day. So you could kind of tell the latitude on a map where you are on open sea. But longitude, when there was no landmarks telling you how far east or west you had traveled, again on open sea, no landmarks, you got lost, and often like big time lost, which could mean at worst cases a lot of lost lives. The ship navigators had their ways. They were and their kind of methods, they were ranging from these magical beliefs to different primitive techniques, but it was really more or less guesswork. And then this huge shipwreck happened in 1707. 4 British ships went down under with their admiral with the ships, and over 2,000 sailors died. And so the British government, they announced the Longitude Prize. The Longitude Prize, meaning that whoever would come up with a practical, with an accurate method to determine longitude on open sea would win this prize of 20,000 sterling pounds, which equals millions of euros or dollars in modern value. And longitude here, just to make things clear in case somebody's confused. Latitude on the map, now north, south. Longitude, west, east. Open sea, no landmarks. It used to be really difficult, if not impossible, to really tell how far west, how far east you had traveled on open sea. And so they came up with this longitude prize. And amongst others, an English carpenter named John Harrison, he took on this challenge and started developing a mechanical clock accurate enough to be used as a navigation tool. And this was unheard of at the time. I mean, watches, the clocks, they just weren't that accurate. So people were more kind of thinking of coming up with solutions like astronomical solutions, like mapping the stars and finding your longitude that way. But this guy, John Harrison, a carpenter, not a watchmaker, a carpenter, took on the challenge. And so an example, when you would start sailing, say, from London towards west, you'd set the ship clock to the British time, and then, days later on open sea, you determine the noon, midday from the sun. That's pretty easy. You can find when the sun is at the highest spot, that's about noon. So you check the noon, and you would compare it to your noon, where you're located now, to the ship clock, and the time difference of your current noon and the ship clock would tell you how many degrees west you had traveled. Like, if the time difference of the ship noon and London noon was 3 hours, you knew that you had traveled 45 degrees west. And then you check the latitude from the sun, and voila, you knew where you were. Simple, assuming that the clock was accurate enough, but in those days they were not. And well, the best pendulum clocks with those that you had in the houses, wherever you had those in churches, they kept the time somewhat okay, provided that nobody moved the clock, provided that the temperature didn't change or nothing weird happened. Well, you can imagine that on open sea, it just didn't work. So back to John Harrison. As said, he was a carpenter, not a watchmaker, but he was talented and he was determined, and he had a vision of an accurate ship clock. And it's a long and fascinating story, cut short. But, this journey took John Harrison all his life, over 60 years, to develop a sea watch that would eventually convince King of England, George III, to grant Harrison the award. Well, not officially even the award, because there was a lot of this political plotting going on against Harrison and blah, 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 blah. But anyways, on practical sense, John Harrison did get the money in the end. So he became a millionaire of his time. But money, was that the primary motor that drove him into doing what he did? Many inventions that Harrison developed during his life, they became the golden standards for watchmakers, and many of those principles are still being used in mechanical timepieces. So, invented by an English carpenter, a truly fascinating story. Anyway, I will show you a picture. We're getting there. It's just a long scenery route, but, Poo Ninja is saying old clocks suffer from their version of Fred Sprout. Yeah, that's right. That's right. I'm going to show you guys a picture. There. That's the sea watch, the ship chronometer, named H4, the 4th generation version of Harrison's watches that he made. During his lifetime, he was able to make 5 different versions: H1, H2, H3, H4, and finally, towards his death, number 5. But the 4th generation, this one was the one that changed the world. He and the development over 60 years, and 3 years after he was granted the award, the Longitude award, 3 years later, John Harrison passed away at the age of 83. There's a great book about that. Longitude, the true story of a lone genius who solved the greatest scientific problem of his time. So anybody who's interested in this stuff, go ahead, go find the book. So what does this have to do with anything? With Japan, with guitars, whatever? Well, bear with me. We're getting there, I promise. Well, to be able to surpass all the challenges, the guy, John Harrison, he had to literally bend over backwards all his life to achieve what he did. He kept endlessly refining his watches, and he was never really completely satisfied. Never. Whenever he got something ready, he got the generation 2 ready. When that clock became ready, his mind was already working on the next improvements for the next edition, for the next generation. So Harrison cared deeply for his work, every aspect, every step of it, and that deep caring, that determination, the dedication, together with his year by year improving understanding of the challenges from the concept. From the concept, the big picture, all the way to the tiniest microscopic detail. So those elements provided the quality for Harrison's watch that I showed you the picture, the quality that kept accurate time on open sea, regardless of the temperature, regardless of the humidity, regardless of the storms. Captain Cook had the Harrison H4 on his expeditions, and he called it the trusted friend. The trusted friend. Think about it. That's, mechanical time. I mean, they saved lives, literally saved lives. It was a matter of life and death that you could depend on those gadgets that have in the modern age in some sense become unnecessary because we have our smartphones and all the possible different ways of telling the time. From one aspect. There is other aspects to it. Let's not go deeper into that world. But we ended up now with the word quality. So what does that have to do, the story before, what does that have to do with Japan? We'll connect the dots in a little while. You'll understand. So I'm a big fan of things made in Japan. It could be cars, it could be tools such as knives, chisels, saws, or watches, hi-fi, guitars. And the question is, why? Why so? Why do I seem to be drawn often towards the Japanese way, the Japanese stuff? When it comes to choosing, I always see what they're doing in Japan. And I take that part as my, weighing the options. So what draws me there? Is it the design? Or is it some kind of a coolness factor of Japanese? Is it some kind of a desirability factor? It could be, I guess it could be partly those things, but I think at the top of the list is the quality. Made in Japan, to me and to a lot of people, in the modern world, it equals high quality. And why is that? Because it wasn't always that way. Especially when it comes to industry, say electronics or guitars made in Japan. Made in Japan used to be made in China of its time, back in the 1960s. The cheap option, not the premium option, not the coolest option. Nope, the cheap option made in Japan. That's the way it used to be with industrial goods. So what happened? What is it that turned the tables? Well, the Japanese culture it's it's quite unique. Damien is saying here. Because they do everything with full passion. Yeah, that's one aspect of it. And the Japanese culture, it is quite unique. It's first of all, a tightly closed culture that is quite challenging to understand for someone like myself, an outsider, more in some regards a fanboy of Akira Kurosawa's movies and certain aspects of Japanese culture. Not saying that it's a perfect culture. There's the dark side to it as well, but the more I've kind of started to understand it and have Japanese friends and who have introduced me to the culture in at least a little bit below the surface of the culture, I'd like to think. But it's still, I'm a total outsider. It's not very easy to understand fully. But it is a closed inward culture. But it's also a culture of dignity. It's a culture of honor. For me, there is also this twist to all of it, Another more of an epic or more of a sentimental story-like aspect than the cold fact of weighing the quality between different products. Perspective that excites me, a perspective that I can strongly relate to in my own life, my work here in Finland. And I'll call it now the David and Goliath phenomenon. See, when it comes to industrial goods, such as listed before, Juha should be a professor. I could listen to him all day. Thank you. I take that as a compliment. What happens here? Just a second. My camera is doing some funny stuff. I'm getting really good comments. I'm not reading. I'm not watching. You guys are confusing my focus. But we're getting back to your comments. I've glanced too much already. Yeah. When it comes to industrial goods, such as listed before, let's take electric guitars as an example. Japan is clearly an underdog. Japan is not the country of rock music. It's not the country of rock music. It is not identified the country of cool guitars. No, Japan is the underdog. In order to prove themselves, they have to be twice as good as the source product, the original. And so it started with guitars, copying the Western designs, climbing up the ladder, And so the Japanese guitar industry became an extremely vivid business all the way back in the 1960s. I have this book here. Another book. Professors read books. History of Japanese electric guitars. Very, very cool book. Telling the story. It's listing all the Japanese key people, the enthusiasts of those early times when the electric guitar industry arrived to Japan. It lists all the factories, all the brand names they make guitars for. It's a very different story when compared to the American companies, to the iconic American companies. You all know which ones I refer to. One example from this book, the famous Matsumoto Guitar Factory, known for their very even good quality guitars, yet affordable guitars, since the 1960s. But nobody knows a Matsumoto guitar. That's the name of the factory, but that's not the name of the guitar. They made the guitars in over 40 different brands. 40 different brands. Matsumoto Factory. There is nothing else left from the factory nowadays than that memorial plate or memorial statue there at the front gate, where the front gate used to be. Some of the brands include Aria. I used to have one of those Aria Pro 2 guitars. They made also Arai guitars. Belladere, Blackstone, Bruno, Carver, Columbia, Conrad, Cortez, Crown, Dia, Elk, Encore, so on. So it's an endless list. And a lot of these factories in Japan, they're the same. Did you know that Ibanez never has had a factory? Ibanez doesn't have a factory. Ibanez is a marketing company. And these companies, Matsumoku and the other factories in Japan, made guitars also for Ibanez. So it's a very different kind of culture of how the industry was built. Whoever wanted to buy and rebrand, they made it for them. And yet they're not. You could think that this is like a cheap way of doing it. Let's just make it for anybody who wants it. But they're still, these Japanese factories, they're not known for their volumes or their lack of interest in a product due to selling to anyone with any brand name they wanted. No, they are known for the quality. And Matsumoku wasn't always even a guitar factory either. First they were a subcontractor company of the Singer sewing machine company. And when that business started going down for them in the 50s towards 60s, guitars were the saviors. So they changed the product line completely from sewing machine to a guitar and started learning. And this part, I think it's very fascinating that, with the Japanese, there's this interesting collision of characteristics of honor and of humility. Because on the one hand, losing your face it's serious business in Japan. And yet at the same time, there's this incredible humility in surrendering yourself to learn and learn and learn, to understand better, to understand even better and better endlessly. And while Japanese were the underdog in guitar industry, they would still always be the guys with the upper hand. The underdog that has to kind of work twice as hard. And then there's the upper hand, the made in USA, the made in Japan, the made in USA. In the electric guitar world, made in USA, that's the magical code. When a guitar is made in USA, it's assumably the best. Or at least this is a myth that has stuck really hard, no matter what the most influential major guitar brands have done with their quality. At the very least, the made in USA stamp in a guitar, it is a detail that likely is seen as a positive, as something that adds to its value when it's made in USA. And yet, all of us who have been around in the guitar universe for some decades, we all know how the quality of some of the most loved iconic guitar brands has been embarrassingly bad during certain periods. 70s, 80s. I'm not going to go to the details, and I'm not here to tell, slash this country down and praise this country. That's not the point of this. But, just stating some facts. So why did the quality of those made in USA guitars, why did the quality come down during those decades? And at the same time, the Japanese quality, it kept creeping up. Well, I think that, owning the upper hand, having the ownership of that premium prestige status for extended period of time, like decades, it easily makes you lazy. You lose interest. You don't care of the actual instrument anymore. Somebody said it here. Let me bring it now. Greg says, Yet because they care. Yeah. So if you don't care of the actual instrument anymore, it starts showing. Money can so easily become the primary engine. So let's assume if my theory holds, while certain USA brands became a bit lazy, their competitors in Japan didn't. And you see now the connection with the earlier, John Harrison and his ship chronometer watch. Remember Harrison, who cared deeply for his work, every aspect, every step of it, and that deep caring, that determination, that dedication, together with his endlessly improving understanding of the challenges, from the big picture all the way to microscopic detail, just living that quality. Take that and look at the Japanese character, the Japanese focus into that detail, and beating it. So the question is then, can David ever beat the Goliath in such fundamental way that the tables would turn for real? You know what I mean? Can Japanese guitar making, or some other country, we're using Japanese guitar making here as an example of a mechanism of how things seem to work somewhat in our world. Is it possible that Japanese guitar, or some other country, could it ever raise to the highest throne, so to speak? Or will they always remain the underdog? Maybe better in quality, but still can't quite compete with the prestige, with the premium one can add to the price tag with, say, in guitar world, with the Made in USA stamp. Before I continue, let me read a few of your comments, okay? It's great to have you guys here. Somebody's saying nice hat. Bogdan Danila. I don't know how to say that. Sorry about that. Nice hat. Must refer to my travel hat that I haven't been able to use much the past year. Let's hope this year it will change. Let me quickly browse through. Puninja says, I remember once ordering parts from Japan. We requested no more than 1 out of 1,000 defective pieces. We received 10,000 perfect units and a box of 10 defective units with a note asking why I would want them. I love that. That sounds very Japanese. Okay, here we are. This is, of course, yes, quite similar to the Finnish culture. There are certain similarities that probably fascinate me. It isn't exactly the same, but there are certain similarities that are quite remarkable, I would say, even. Somebody says, one more thing, I have 4 Ibanez, Team J Croft, and I want the Ruokangas. There you go. And Mibu, I think, is commenting to Malasu 7. Of course you want one. It has nothing to do with your Japanese guitars. Why would these two things conflict with each other? Come on, it's all about caring for what we do. Punisha says, I've got a Singer sewing machine. So do we. We have a Singer sewing machine right there in the next room from 1930, I think. It's a pretty cool thing. And I'm thinking, when I was reading from the book, that Matsumoku, one of my favorite Japanese guitar factories, used to make parts for Singer back in the day. I'm thinking that whether maybe the wooden parts or something, probably the wooden parts, if anything, you know, but because they were Matsumoto were good with wood. They had excellent drying methods with wood. That's one of the keys for how you make great guitars. So when I was reading from that, you know, that the Matsumoto was really known for how they dried their wood. I'm thinking myself like, aha, that's why, because that's one of those absolutely basic key elements on, you know, making a good guitar. The material just has to be right? Okay. So what was I going to say? Yeah, I was reading through the comments. Okay. Moving on. I was saying something about, will Japan or Japanese guitars or some other country, can they ever overcome, or will they forever remain that underdog? Well, it's of course it's unlikely. It's unlikely that the tables would ever turn, but it's possible. And now let's go back to my my watch analogy that we started with. Isn't it so that nothing can beat Swiss watchmaking, right? I know we have here Swiss viewers, so guys, you can fight with me on this one. Well, did you know that Switzerland wasn't always the mecca of watchmaking? You know, the best watches used to be made in the UK and France, and Switzerland kind of took first a role as their cheap, you know, subcontractor for the UK and France. The cheap watches came from Switzerland in the early days. But these guys, the Swiss, they were hungry and they were determined, and year by year their skills improved until it would be fair to say that Swiss watchmaking truly revolutionized the business, you know, and they became the #1 country of watchmaking, the most influential country of watchmaking in the world. And so you could say that the tables turned right there. You know, UK and France held that position. Swiss took over, so much so that our generation, people who are in any remote way interested in watches, timekeeping or horology and the history of timekeeping, you know, tables did turn and Swiss took over for real, but it wasn't always like that. So the Swiss did it. They took over for real, but now the question remains whether the Swiss, is that a given? Will they forever keep that position, the throne? Or is it possible that the Swiss have or would become lazy too? Because too easy times for too long, you know what I'm saying? You know, it goes around, it comes around. And in any case, there were certain individuals in Japan a long time ago who were big fans of the Swiss watchmaking. You know, we go back to the 19th century. And so they started copying the Western wonders of watches. Kintaro Hattori was one of the fanboys. And this is another long story cut embarrassingly short. Kintaro Hattori, eventually in the year 1892, he started producing watches under the brand name Seikosha. You know, translated loosely as the house of exquisite workmanship. And years went by, and the Seikosha watches kept improving and morphing into their own breed, rebranded in 1924, as Seiko watch, and they were not copies anymore. They even became so determined at Seiko to beat the Western watchmaking at their own game that Seiko divided their company into two, for real, and they put these two Seikos to compete with each other on the Japanese market. So they were beating each other to make better and better watches until they got so good that they were ready to compete internationally. And in 1963, Seiko became the first company to take part to the famous Neuchâtel competition held in Switzerland, a competition to win the title of the most accurate chronometer watch. So Seiko took part, one of those Seikos first, and then eventually both of them, because Seiko were good but not winning. So what did they do? They went back home, they worked more, they competed again, and this repeated, and their track record kept rising on the competition. And until in the end, the Japanese, they were winning in every category. Every category of the Swiss competition. So what did the Swiss do? Well, they pulled the plug. What does that mean? They ended the competition. They closed it. The competition was no more after Seiko. The two sides of Seiko kind of, took all the prizes home. So, again, Japan remains in that position at the time we live in. They remain in that position. Seiko might be, I think they are the biggest. Seiko and Citizen and Casio, they are the three biggest corporations in the watch industry and this type of electronics industries. But still, they hold that position of the underdog. No matter how accurate, no matter how prestige, how superior quality a Japanese watch is, there's always made in Switzerland. The Swiss-made watch has the upper hand. So the question is, will this remain? The Swiss took it from the UK, from the French, a long time ago, but will the Swiss keep it? So this comes to what you and I can maybe, hopefully, learn from all this. Well, well, before I go to that, I mean, it is that when I talked about that, there is that aspect of, for me personally, in my life, making guitars in Finland, that aspect that I can relate to with the Japanese guitar making being the underdog, because we are in that same position. We're also the underdog. Finland is not the country known for its rock music or known for its electric guitars traditionally. So I mean, we share that position where we have to prove ourselves, and we have to just work on it, and we have to just keep on understanding better and better and learning and finding our way in this world. Damien, so you compare Swiss watches to Gibson guitars. I didn't say that. You said that. Damien, I did not say that. I have a great respect. Really, I have to. Now, let's make one thing clear. I have a great respect to Swiss watch industry and Swiss watchmaking and the individual Swiss watchmakers and all that. There's absolutely no critic of that kind here. But what I'm asking here is that what kind of qualities, bring us to that kind of superior quality that is easy to recognize because it is just so obvious to see and hear and feel, no matter what way you look at it. What kind of qualities as human beings, as companies, maybe whatever, what kind of qualities bring us, or what kind of features, characteristics bring us to that state where we can grasp that kind of quality. And on the other side, what kind of features and characteristics can take that throne away from us? Any one of us. So anyway, so it's that underdog, upper hand. It's that thing that is kind of, speaking to me, because I see that in my work. I see that the way we do. So I find romance in that David and Goliath. There's just that kind of romance, being that underdog who is just, has to be so much better to prove your point. And well, so what can we learn? Well, we live an age of absolutely overwhelming prosperity. We live in an age of such richness that is material richness that is unheard of. Not every human being, no, but the majority of us. And it's all the time the statistics, no matter how things look like, things are dipping here and there, and we have this political situation here and there and whatnot, but on average, year by year, decade by decade, the human race is just prospering more and more and better and better. And everything is so protected, that we easily become lazy. And we stop caring. Remember all that stuff about caring. Greg said it there. They care. And when you care of what you do, the result is different. And if we become lazy, if we stop caring, and from another angle, when we are very, very good at something, it's not only laziness that is threatening us. We can also easily become arrogant. When we're so good that we take the stance that actually we're so good that others are not as good. And that kind of state of mind, that arrogance, that's when our focus shifts from doing our very best to something else. A beginning of an end. So I'm not pointing fingers to Swiss or Americans. We all have that same code written into us. So let's stay alert. Is the Japanese quality better? Well, sometimes it is. History proves that it's remarkable. It's the eighth wonder in some ways. But there's that same phenomenon to be seen in the modern Japan as elsewhere in the world. And if money becomes the primary engine, it doesn't matter. If that wins the culture over, it has consequences. So, quality. There's a word that suffers from horrible inflation. If you think of the elements that drove John Harrison to invent that ship chronometer that saved countless lives, during the last years of his own life and in the following decades, centuries, like even. You know, that whole spectrum of focus, patience, and caring that it took from him to achieve what he did. And in the same way, the Japanese mentality of forging ahead, improving, gaining better and better understanding, you know, the same principles, they can be adapted to anything we do. You know, wiping a table clean, preparing a meal, you know, whatever. So we have a lot of snow here now in Finland. And here in our neighborhood, the municipality, they keep the roads and the streets clean. And, you know, it works pretty well. A snowstorm doesn't typically create chaos. I know that there's been snowstorms in southern Germany and elsewhere in Europe where, you know, a few centimeters of snow and everything stops. But in Finland it's different. Well, we're up here in the north, and I'm not bragging. It's just, you know, it's just another snowstorm for us. Because, you know, they have a lot of machine power here to utilize to keep things orderly and well when the snow comes. Because every year, more or less, it comes. Some years it comes so much that you just have to be prepared. So, anyways, lately it's been snowing almost every day, quite a bit, and I do my part, meaning I shovel the snow. It's not really shoveling in Finland. We have typically it's a, I don't know what to call it, lumikola. Somebody from Finland, tell me what is lumikola in English. Let's call it lumikola. It's a very big shovel that you can push. It's a very handy tool. It doesn't have an engine to it. It's not a plow. It doesn't, you know, no diesel engine or not any other kind of engine, muscle engine only. And I do my part. I shovel the snow from our shop building, walkways, the driveways, parking lot. Emma does it some other days. And well, anyways, then the guy from the municipality comes with this big machine and he cleans the streets. But I think there's actually two different guys. Depending on the time of the day, they do this. So why two guys? How do I know that? Well, because I don't really see when they are doing it out there, typically. So I wouldn't recognize from their face or anything. But why would there be two guys? Well, one of the guys, he just, you know, swooshes by with this monster machine past our building, and after he's gone, I need to go, or somebody needs to go. Typically it would be me. I need to go out to touch up his work a bit, because where our driveway ends and the street begins, you know, after the guy has gone past, there's always this huge pile of snow after him. I need to kind of clean that away from that joining area. But then there's the other guy. You know, when he does the job, I noticed that he slows down when passing our house, and he clearly sees what I have done. And instead of throwing a pile of snow on our driveway, he continues where I stopped, you know, slow and easy, and he kind of takes the rest of it. If he leaves a track of snow, he even comes back to touch it up himself. You know, the first guy, I don't know. I'm not complaining about him. I'm just, these two guys are different. I can see it from the result of their work. The first guy is maybe too busy, maybe tired, maybe stressed out, maybe just simply doesn't care because the work doesn't maybe give him so much. Or maybe another theory, maybe he's the best of the bunch. Maybe he's always been the best of the bunch, you know, doing the snow work, and has become a bit arrogant, a diva, you know. And so he has the guts to just swoosh by and leave that, you know, that those losers will clean it after me because I'm the diva here around, you know, plowing the snow. While the second guy, I'm pretty sure that judged by the result of his work, I would say he enjoys what he's doing. It looks like that. He, you know, he does the work in such way that I would imagine, like, because when I'm looking at after this guy has passed, and I'm looking at, wow, he really cleaned up so that I can't tell where did I end and he began. So I would say that, in fact, he does the work in such a way that the work itself feeds more enjoyment back to him. That's how work can be when you care. Okay, there's another theory from Sören. Maybe it's one guy, but sometimes it's drunk. Yeah, that's another possibility. Not arguing against. And not a big deal anyways, but just wanted to kind of, because it really applies to everything in our lives. The way we do it, the way we care about what we're doing, the way we are focusing into what we're doing. Yeah. So guys, there wasn't so many words about guitars today, but then again, read between the lines, and actually it is all about guitars, right? It is all about guitars too. So I had some book recommendations to you. Whoever is interested in horology, the history of timekeeping, which I think is pretty fascinating because it has certain aspects of timekeeping. No other character or species that we know about is interested in timekeeping, which tells something about us, the human race, the human beings. The clock is ticking, so to speak. So it's a matter of life and death. It's a matter about immortality in some ways, if you want to go really philosophical into the history of timekeeping. But anyways, I'll leave to that. Thank you. I'll take care now, and look after your loved ones. It does look like there's a beginning emerging, a beginning of an end to this strange time we've had the past year. But we're not there yet. So people, stay safe, be patient, keep wearing those masks and washing your hands and all that. And if you like this video, hit the like button. Consider subscribing to the channel. It does help spread the word. There's that bell icon if you want a notification for the next video. I'll try to send the right video link next time. Oh, Edmund is here too. There's so much people. Great. Hello, Edmund. Great. I'm very thankful. Thank you all for your support so much once again. And peace, love, and good music. Until next time.